Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
What defines a hero? We're going to be asking that question and many more in today's episode of Systematic Geekology. We are the priests of the geeks, discussing as we continue on through the manga My Hero Academia and anime. I should probably add that as well. I'm not alone. I, of course, being Christian Ashley, I am joined today by Elizabeth Pangalangan Clyde. How's it going, Pang?
It's going pretty well. I'm excited to be here and to have a mental break from my reality. That is how it's
Yes. I totally get that. In between, school, church, friends, and what else I have to do, like it gets a little rough.
It really do be hard out here some days, but it's okay.
Yeah. We get to talk about Deku. We get to talk about my favorite arc in My Heroes. So I'm not going to complain too much. Spoilers for my opinions on this arc. Pang, what have you been watching, geeking out on recently?
I've been going hardcore old school Yu-Gi-Oh! The original Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't know why, but I just had a hankering to rewatch it all, and so we're going crazy right now.
Okay, yeah. This was not planned at all because I've been geeking out on Card Fight Vanguard, which is like a discount Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. And yeah, totally unplanned, but yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! It is what it is. I love that series so much, but Card Fight's pretty good too. So that's it for geeking out. Like we discussed before, we have been going through My Hero Academia arc by arc. If you want to see those other episodes, there should be a link in the description down below so you can hear our coverage of the system. And by the way, the manga is over, so we're getting real close to the anime also being over. I think it'll be that time.
Because I'm not caught up with the manga. I only follow the anime.
Yep. Which is currently airing as of this production. And I think there's going to be one more season after that, and they'll be done. Yeah.
Gosh, just a piece of my heart goes with it, but I'm glad they don't drag it out,
Yes. Like
so
Horikoshi got to do the ending he wanted. Like he got to go there at his own pace. That's good because not every mangaka gets that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Peng, do you want to go over with me what happens in this arc and we can piggyback off of each other?
You start and I'm a piggyback off of you because I remember it pretty well, but you remember it so much better. And I'll go one fact in the beginning and go straight to the end somehow. So you have to keep me on track.
Fair enough. All right. So we start off as we ended last time with an older student taking an interest after having heard of, Deku and Bakugo having a fight between each other. They are currently being punished with a very lenient punishment considering what they were doing to each other with, extra work. Bakugo got one extra day compared to Deku, and Deku ends up meeting a boy named Mirio, my guy, who is a student a year older than him. He's a complete and utter goofball. He looks like 1010 if he is 1010 became Superman. He brings a freshness to the show I really enjoy. And
I do love him.
Yes. He has been interning with All Might's old sidekick, Sir Night Eye. And he's kind of wanting to get into know Deku more because he's kind of noticed there's something a little bit with him. It calls him a problem child student at certain points of time. But we're also introduced to the big three of UA High School, of which Mirio is among them. We have him, Tamaki, Sun Eater, and Nejire-chan, who are our main members of this group. They're like the best of the best the school has.
I'm
to
also
offer
obsessed with Sun Eater too. I love them all.
Yeah, we get some great introductions here. Out of the two, of course, happens to be the girl who doesn't get as much focus as everyone else. But
Always.
yep, these are some solid characters introduced here. What do you want to take from there?
Well, I just want everyone to know Mamillion, he always goes "Ayo" a lot. And so even my husband and I, we have incorporated that into like our daily like "Ayo." Like we just it's a piece of our everyday conversation almost.
Yes.
Just when we get excited, we do it. It's a great time. And then I love the friendship. And the girl, she does get just like any other trio, the girl, she gets her moment down the road, but right now she's a pretty face who's strong. I mean, which
Yes.
is more than what we can say for Sakura, right? Sorry, I had to go there. Love her still.
Yeah, we should add Naruto to the list of series we cover arc by arc when we're
Yeah,
done
as
with
I'm wearing my
Heroes.
Naruto jersey right now, that
yeah.
would be wild.
Yeah.
But I love Mamillion because he has a quirk that just seems to be unbeatable, but then you find out the super handicap. And it's crazy because we just
Yes.
had a church meeting today and like, we had breakout sessions. It's all about like a difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And so pretty much a fixed mindset is like, oh, well, they have natural talent, must be nice. I'll never catch up to them. As in a growth mindset is always growing, always developing, always improving. And so when people see how strong Mamillion is, they're like, oh, well, of course, he has such a fantastic quirk. He can go through walls. Like we when we punch him, we can't even hit him. Must be nice. But we learn how much he trained and how he had to work harder than everyone else, because whenever he does go through a wall, he has to pretty much think about every single cell growing through that wall. And whenever he's running underground through the floor, he's blind and deaf. So like he has he just has to work so much harder. So I kind of think that's just like kind of a great coincidence. We talked about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and we go into the big three because people just assume they're the top because they have natural talent. Even Sun Eater, he can't do crowds, and he's really cute emo kid. So of course I love him.
Imagine that.
Shocker. But also he has a fun quirk. Whatever he eats, he can use it as a power. So like, he eats some crab, now he has some cool armor. He eats some squid, he has these tentacles. Like, I mean, what a cool power. I like it.
Yeah. I think that's important you bring up that distinction about Mirio, because we learn like he fights every single student in class 1A at once and beats them. And it's like, well, that's just because he's better than us.
Easily beats
he's just
them
naturally
too.
better. Yeah. Like very few, there's not even a hit brought in on him, but we learn it's because he actually trained. He actually learned how to use his quirk, because there could have been a point in his life where he said, well, it's hard, so I'll give up. But he doesn't, because he wants to be a hero that badly. And it serves as impetus for Deku to join him as an intern for Sir Night-Eye, who you learn used to be All Might's sidekick. And as All Might puts it, we kind of broke up. And we learned that part of that reason is that Night-Eye had a vision of the future, because that's his quirk, where he saw All Might dead. And All Might was like, I'm going to keep doing this in defiance of fate. Sir Night-Eye wanted to save him because it's his best friend and he doesn't want to see any harm come to him. So they essentially just broke up. Sir Night-Eye made his own hero agency. He doesn't like Deku that much, but Deku's able to prove himself to him by the fact that he still loves All Might as much as he does. And in the process, we find that there's this new villain out there called Overhaul, who was working with the Yakuza, a Japanese mafia, for those who don't know, and trying to make them come back to power, because supervillains are really in control of the underground element, and old crime bosses and families aren't. So he's trying to remake a name for themselves. So he goes up to the League of Villains, clowns on them, kills Magna, gets rid of one of Compress's arms, and forces them to work with him. And we learn part of his plan is there's this little girl named Eri who has a quirk to where she can reverse things to a different state. So if you've lost an arm, she could use the little horn she has on her head that's constantly growing to pull things back. Or if you're really hurt, she can move that to where you were never hurt before. And he wants his father figure, the original boss of this organization, to come back to full health, because right now he's dying. They stumble upon her, Deku and Mirio, and aren't able to save her despite noticing obvious signs of like abuse. And then they learn, oh, this is the girl we're actually looking for. This is the organization we're actually trying to fight against. And go ahead and take it from there. Who else joins in the fight?
Yeah, so we actually get to learn a little bit about the Hero Network and how they are organized. because we talked about how you have to have a license to be a hero, and so they understand that the Yakuza, since it's the mob, it's a huge network, so it's not just one person who can take this on. And so we get to know, what was it, Locke, that, like, I call him the Sonic.
Rock Lock.
Yeah, the Sonic wannabe, or the Static Shock wannabe, it looks like. And he's like, what are these kids doing here? Because we find out with Fat Gum, also, I want to hug Fat Gum. Like, he just looks so fun. Which is just another big hero that Sun Eater, does he yeah, he goes under it. And then Red Riot is also with Fat Gum too, right?
Kirishima, yeah.
Yep. So we learn a little bit about them too, and they get into the spotlight because Red Riot actually blocked the bullet of what they're developing from Ares. And so the Static Shock wannabe is like, what are these kids doing here? Trying to be all, like, big and strong. But you really just see how, like, once again, Class 1A is doing adult things, even though they're just students. They're barely interning. And it's just fun getting to know, like, a little bit more about the Hero Network, because at the end of the day, almost everything is politics. There's a system. You have to have rules to follow, and I'm thankful for that.
Yes. And we learn as well that Ochako and Sue are both interning with Nejire with the number 9 hero, I think, Ryukyu.
The
giant dragon. And they're all being brought together to, like, have a confrontation showdown with Shie Hassaikai, which is, like, the name of the organization, this crime organization. So they come in, bust down the walls. They meet different little mini villains working with that organization that they have to systematically take down. There's some really great moments where Kirishima gets to shine, where, Deku gets to shine. Not so much the other people as much, but they're still there. And then it comes to the point where Mirio finds Overhaul and Eri, and it's a clash of titans between the two of them over the fate of this little girl who he couldn't save earlier. And what they've done is, with Eri's powers, they made those bullets you were talking about that can remove quirks. And it's up to where there's a moment where Mirio can either choose for it to phase through him and hit Eri, or for him to take the hit and save her at the cost of his quirk. And of course, he chooses to save her. But right before he can go down, he still keeps fighting up until the point where, right as he's about to lose, Deku comes in, beats up on Overhaul, joins with Eri, and because of her powers, is able to take back any of the damage he takes from going more than the percentage he's at this time, which is, like, I don't know, 8 or 20 or whatever percentage we're at for All for One. It's going to be 1 for all. Through this, they're able to work together, take down Overhaul, save Eri, at the cost of Sir Night-Eye dying as well.
Oh, he becomes a donut. It's very sad.
Yes.
It's very sad. It's like the Titanic for me. Like, Jack could have fit on the door, and I'm like, Night-Eye could have, dang it, survived. That's just, it's the same, like, emotional, like, mad I get.
Yes. So with that, on his deathbed, he kind of predicts that, Mirio is going to become a hero again. And the kids go back to class, and there are reports of these different villains showing up. The League of Villains takes down Overhaul. He's about to be brought to prison. Managed to take both of his arms away, which means he really has no quirk anymore, which establishes them as the number 1 threat again. We see Gigantomachia for the first time, this giant hulking thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the last part of this is when Deku's meeting Mirio at the hospital and says he'll wait for him to come back to UA, because there's kind of a hope that maybe Eri, if her powers grow better, he might get his quirk back.
There is that hope, but also Fat Gum's fight was probably one of the best fights, I think, in the whole thing. So I don't know if we're talking about that later, but if not, we need to.
I believe we may be talking about that later.
Good.
So, Pang, you've mentioned a couple before, but do you actually have an absolute favorite character in this arc?
I keep on comparing these characters, but they just, because you can only draw so many, like, characters, you know what I mean? Like, before they start, you watch so much anime, you compare them. So I have to say maybe the Sasuke knockoff, Sun Eater.
Okay.
I just love him. Like, he's so not gloomy, but he's just so shy. And the whole reason why his name is Sun Eater is because Mirio shines so brightly. And Mirio is such a great, like, friend. He hypes up, I can't think of his real name, but Sun Eater. And he's like, well, Yeah, Tamaki says like, well, if you shine so brightly, and I am going to be Sun Eater because like that's how I become better than the sun, I guess. He has a better way to explain it, but it's just like, do that. You do that, Sun Eater.
He's a really cool character. I really like his quirk. Of course, I mean, technically he appears in the arc before this, if I recall correctly, but like he doesn't speak. But we meet Mirio for the first time. I love this goofball of a kid who, as you learned, has way more to him. There's some hidden depths there about what does it mean to be a hero? What does it mean to sacrifice something about yourself? Because like in this world, your quirks are everything. I mean, with 80% of the population having one, there's kind of this unspoken thing of like your quirk kind of defines you. It kind of makes you a little better than other people. And that's the one thing he's willing to give up to save a little girl who has had no one in her corner this entire time. He's what makes a hero for me. I really love his story, and he doesn't die. And you could have argued he should have, but there's still more for his story to be told. I love Mirio a lot here.
Yeah, he is pretty great. And he's just so positive too. You need that positive, upbeat friend that you're just naturally drawn to. Like everyone needs that in the friend group. It's such a balanced group.
Yeah. So other than these two, do we have a favorite character that was introduced in this arc?
Was Fat Gum introduced in this arc?
Fat Gum was absolutely introduced in this arc.
I love Fat Gum. He's so fun. And he's fluffy. And I want to hug him.
Oh my gosh. Could you imagine?
His fat would eat me.
So for those who don't know, Fat Gum, his quirk is the ability, I think it's the more he eats or something like that, the more mass he obtains, to where he's able to fight a little better. He's a little stronger. He's a little more resistant to being, hurt.
Yeah, pretty much the fat like absorbs your punches and kind of like knocks you back a little bit. Plus, he's just strong. And so whenever he does his big old fight, like, and he becomes skinny and hot, I liked it. It was inspiring.
So he's our Choji for this, if we're going to keep the Naruto comparison.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Honestly, though, I love skinny Choji too.
Yeah. I mean, I love my girl Neshere. I love her design. I love her quirk. She got a very cute and bubbly personality. Her introduction scene, asking all the questions we probably thought about as readers, like, "Hey, what's with the color of your skin there, or your horns, Mina?" And then asking Mineta about his great balls, and of course he used sexual harassment. But the less said about him in this, the better. But just like questions that we would have asked about, okay, what does it mean for you to have something like this? She asked because she's a little unfettered, shall we say.
Yeah, she doesn't know personal space. Yeah, but she's super friendly too. And so even though what's it called? And you learn more. I'm trying not to share about the story we learn about her later on, but she's cool. We like her.
Yeah.
She's cute.
Yeah, definitely someone. Yeah, she deserves more focus, but what are you going to do with the cast of however many characters are in here? You got to focus on some.
It's just a man's world with females living in it,
Yep. Those females don't deserve the same amount of screen time as everyone else.
Absolutely not. And they will put us in provocative clothes just for the fan service. It's fine. I don't care.
Not that I complain too much.
Right. Me neither, honestly.
I mean, I will say this about the series. It is very equal opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Both men and women. They look really good.
Yeah. I'm not mad.
Okay. So I think I might know the answer to this, but how about your favorite scene or moment from this arc?
Oh yeah, no, definitely the fight of Fat Gum and that other guy. It was beautiful. It hypes me up. It's just like, especially because like Fat Gum takes Red Riot and he like pushes him out the way. So it's just, a hero actually doing a hero thing and protecting 1A, because you don't really see that much. 1A is there saving the day, and Fat Gum was like, I got to do this. And plus it was fun. Like if you haven't seen it, just look up the scene. It's so fun.
Yeah, that whole scene is really well done, because we get into Tamaki's backstory there too. Oh no, that's right before that. We get into Kirishima's backstory really for the first time, where he grew up like idolizing, Crimson Riot, who was this old superhero back in the day who had kind of similar powers to him, if I remember correctly. And I think one of the things, he was being interviewed one time, he was asked if he was afraid, and he's like, yeah, all the time, but I got stuff to do, so I can't afford to. And then to see Kirishima do the same, I won't lie to you guys, I cried watching that scene of him like becoming a hero, and like everything it meant to him in that moment to stop the threat of this villain. It's a really well done scene. And of
It
course,
really is.
the reveal of Fat Gum's ability, all it can do, and him using up all that expended fat and energy to lose his powers for a bit, so he'll have to re-eat and regain all that mass again for the sake of keeping these kids safe. Yeah, I agree with you. That's a really good scene.
And then like just how we said goodbye to Night Eye was like really emotionally well done. It
Ooh.
wasn't okay, he died, get over it. It wasn't as jarring and traumatic as a One Piece donut death, as we may say, because that was freaking traumatizing.
Yes.
And I bawled. I cried with Night Eye too, but it was almost like we got to grieve alongside of it. You know what I mean? Got to like kind of say goodbye to him. And that was kind of special when you fall in love with a character like that. When they get taken away, I just felt like they were taken away very poetically.
Yeah, especially for someone like him, like he comes across at the beginning as a huge jerk who's like, it's my way or the highway. If you don't do things my specific way with my specific sense of humor, then you're not part of the team. But then over time you learn, okay, why is he like this? What is his relationship with All Might? What caused that breakup between them? Between very good friends. And what does it mean for him to be a hero? He sacrifices his life also for the sake of the same girl who he doesn't know. Yet that's his job as a hero.
I also appreciated, I don't know, it just made me laugh whenever they were geeking out about All Might together, because we can all, I feel like we can all relate when we find that one person who is as enthusiastic as you are about that one obscure thing. And it's like you finally, like, you understand me. And so when Deku was like, no, my eyes was actually squinty because he just got out of the vinegar river. And that's why my face was 1/8 of an inch off when I did my All Might impression. I'm like, this is just hilarious. Like, I get it.
Yeah, it that scene, like on the outside looking in, you're like, these two nerds. But at the same time, yeah, of course, you want to find that person who gets really geeky into the things that you love. And the two of you can discuss things, maybe even fight on what you think could happen there. I mean, that's kind of half of the fun of doing this show, is finding other people who don't have to think the same way, but love the same things we do.
Consider subscribing on YouTube, where you can get some other stuff. You get exclusive series like our comic book catch-up, Manga Mustard, Drinks with Tejas, and a companion series we do each year to go with our annual theme. You also get access to Friday Night Frights and Wednesday Night Weeaboo and Spidey Swing Bys with Christian Ashley. You get access to other exclusive shorts, like what I'm going to be doing soon are non-canon, where I'm going to be reviewing different IPs that are outside of canon from our favorite fandoms or the Bible and discussing whether or not it should be canon. You also can get a short of Will's Wednesday pull list. So if you're into comic books, Will goes through his favorites of each week's pull list for himself. You also get other bonuses over there. Most of our surprise content we'll put straight to YouTube, going live over there, that you can check out. And a lot of our regular episodes are also posted on YouTube if you just want to see our smiling faces.
Like just the other day at church, I was like, why? It's me and a band member, and so we just connected so like that, and I'm like, why are we best friends right now? And he said it jokingly and stuff. He's like, because we're the smartest people in the room. And I looked around and I was like, okay, I think educationally wise, like, you're correct, but it was just kind of like that same sense of humor of like, that's something I would have said, bantering. And so when you meet that like instant connection and that instant like humor, and when you're on that same wavelength, there's just nothing like it. It gives you so much life and so much energy. And that's why community is so important, and how the host gets along so well, because we're really not designed to do anything alone, like we are fueled by other people. Like Jesus had his like core people, and like we need our core people too.
Yeah. And it kind of goes to my favorite scene here, is that there's a character who feels very alone, has no one looking out for them. It's all people about what they can do for her, and that's Eri. And my scene is, of course, the scene of Mirio fighting Overhaul to buy as much time as possible for everyone else to get in there to help protect this little girl who has no one, who has only been abused, who has only been desired because she has a quirk that is extremely useful for their goals. And yet, having only met this girl once for like a couple of minutes at best, Mirio sacrifices everything for her sake so that she doesn't have to suffer anymore, which emboldens her to stand up for herself a little bit when Deku comes in and she joins with him to prevent him from suffering the same fate, which she wouldn't have done without Mirio acting like he had. And it's the inspiration as well as that self-sacrifice that really attracts me to a character like that. I mean, because I see that self-sacrifice and I see that immense love in Jesus. Without getting too much in the juke there, that's a huge reason why I love Jesus. It's because of what he did. He did that for me.
He did do that for you. I'm just saying, he is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I follow him.
All right. So we've talked about Sir Night-Eye a little bit. And as mentioned before, his quirk is he can kind of see things in the future. He can only do a certain amount per day. And he has kind of developed a very fatalistic outlook on life and like, well, things are meant to happen because I've seen them that way. And I would argue his greatest flaw is that his belief in fate has overridden everything else. So what are our personal thoughts on fate and how we relate to it?
I mean, but Night-Eye will even say like the future can be changed. But the big falling out with him and All Might wasn't willing to change. He was always going to be the hero. And so in Night-Eye's eyes, like that wasn't changing. But I mean, it's hard for me to believe in something. It's weird because like I believe in God ordained plan, but when I'm like, oh, it was fate. It was fate for us to meet. I was like, no, I was at the grocery store and you were at the grocery store. It's whatever, like, so it's weird for me to like say I'm 100% a believer of fate, because if I find a $5 bill and I was low on cash, I'm not gonna be like, that was fate. I needed that $5 bill. I was like, no, it was someone dropped it. Cool. So what is your opinion on fate? I'm very black and white.
Okay. I don't believe in fate as in like the way most humans think of fate. I believe in God predetermining what happens, but knowing that happening is a result of our free will. So however the heck those two interact, I don't know. I'm not going to write a book on the subject. That's just what I think. In that God knowing as a being out of time, knowing exactly what's going to happen, has already preordained the things that will happen because he knows how people will act and how they will react. He always knew like that Abraham wouldn't actually sacrifice Isaac. He always knew that Jesus would have to die on the cross. He always knew these certain things would happen, but because of knowing about who they are. And me, I look at people and I say, I get very angry sometimes with people say, well, that's just what was always going to happen. There's nothing we can do to change that person. And say, well, I think there's plenty we can do to change it. That was always going to happen, but I think it's a result of people not doing enough to counteract it. And for Night-Eye here, we get that sense of All Might is not going to resist what he sees as his fate. Like, as we learn more about him, we know at a certain point in time, he always kind of figured he'd die at some point in time fighting All for One, because that's what every single All for One user, One for All user did before, that he's aware of. And we learned later that's kind of true.
Like for me to say like fate, it's going to happen exactly like this, like unpopular belief, I don't believe I'm fated to be the wife of Taylor Clyde. I believe that there was an attraction. We met each other. And it's the biggest, I would even say, miracle, because there's 1 billion people on the earth. And so the fact that I went to a back to school bash and he was at the back to school bash, and then I decided out of all the churches to start attending that church. I mean, it's a miracle that we met, but fated to be together, that took a lot of hard work and dating and sacrificing and compromise. Like there's no, like, in my opinion, there's no fate that we were meant to be. You know what I mean? Like that took a lot of work. So then people yeah. So unpopular opinion, because when people are like, oh, we were fated to be together, I'm like, well, then are you not going to put any effort because fate made it happen? So then were you fated to divorce because even Christian marriages end in divorce too? Like, because if you don't do the work, you can just throw it away. So unpopular belief, as far as the anime about how fate can be changed, 100%, because what dealt with, I don't know the statistic, but I remember when I heard it, it was an astronomical amount of choices we face every single day, like opening the car door, tying our shoe, or picking up something, what we eat. There's so many actual average choices that we make a day. And to say we are fated to do something, I'm like, no, it's a choice. Now, my belief system in Jesus affects my choices and my belief in the Bible and wanting to uphold biblical principles. That's going to affect my daily choices. And so saying I'm fated to do something, I'm like, no, how I live my life, how I align my choices is going to come into an outcome more than likely. And even though I live my choices the way I do, it still doesn't determine my whole life because there's so many outside forces of choices I don't have. Like, I've mentioned before, like my family, they're not saved. They're a hot mess express. And so their choices affect me to a certain extent. So just because I live a biblical life doesn't mean I'm stress-free because Jesus fixes everything, because that's not biblical, in case y'all didn't know.
Okay.
So I went on a little rabbit trail, but there's that.
No, that's fine. Well argued. I asked a question. You deserve the answer.
Well, thank you.
You deserve two answer, is what I should
Two
say.
answers. Wow.
No, two answer.
Oh, two answers. I was like, wow. I was thinking of another answer. I was like, wow. Sorry. I'm hyped up on cold medicine a little bit, so a little slow to the take.
Yeah, Pang's a little high today. It's okay.
Just a little bit, I'm gonna take some NyQuil, even though it's almost 5:00 in the afternoon, and just go night-night.
Oh gosh. So speaking of someone who went night-night permanently, Magna is killed in this arc. Just as we learned that they are trans, they've been part of the League of Villains for a little bit ever since they started coming together. We didn't really know too much about them until this has happened. Now, a large debate has been around in comics, manga, anime, and many more different forms of genres and media over the years in regards to how writers kill off their minority characters. What are our thoughts on how this is handled within this story and in fiction in general?
Okay, Magma. Which one was he again? Was he the leader?
No, Magna was born male, wished to transition to female, if I remember correctly.
What did he look like?
Had the gosh, what was it?
Oh, because the dude killed one person.
When Overhaul killed.
Yep.
Killed,
okay, got that.
Killed them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, I got it. Okay, I knew it sounded familiar. I just couldn't. But yeah, I didn't care because he was a side character. I was like, that sucks.
Okay. Well, I would argue that's part of the problem here, and that as we learn more about Magna, we learned that after the fact. You have not let me care about this character because you haven't built them up before now. And now when Magna dies, I feel nothing like you do. And even with the flashback we do kind of get, it's not enough. And honestly, it feels kind of cheap. So you want me to care about them as they're dying or dead? I mean, you can try and manipulate me all you want. That doesn't do anything.
I'm like, yeah, it's too late. Like, I'm already disconnected with them. But you do have to be careful because because when you watch a show and you're like, oh, that sucks, you don't ever want to be callous to someone's death. And our church is over the 9 campuses has over 4,000 people. And so we have a death and I felt very, very sad. It just happened yesterday. I ran into a student at the mall, like, oh, I saw your husband at one of my friend's funeral. And I was like, who died again? Because there's so much, funerals that we attend to. And I even felt like a little check in my spirit. And I was like, what kind of question was that? Like, and I was legit asking, like, oh yeah, who was it again? Who died? But because a death is a death, and even though like it's when it's in the movies or fictional, like even some fictional, like we talked about, we cried. But even if it's a minor character or someone's grandma who attends church that we've never met, like we still should show compassion and empathy or sympathy. Sympathy is when you, because sometimes I get confused, is when you show sorrow for someone in their situation. So you can show sympathy, but empathy is where you actually feel it with them. So usually we have empathy to the people who are closest to us who are hurting, because when they hurt, we hurt. But then if it's someone's grandmother, and let's say you never experienced the loss of a grandmother, you can still show sympathy even though you don't feel it as hard as they do. So I feel like it's always mindful to keep that in mind because it's a decent human quality to have.
Yeah. I'll say in regards to what happens here, the death is done as a bit of shock factor and trying to set up a new villain to show how much better the new villain is compared to someone else. I mean, that's an example of what we call the Worf effect. Back in the day, it was like, how do we prove that this alien menace is so much better than the crew of the Enterprise? Well, we have Worf get beaten up because he's a Klingon. But as well, when it comes to actual deaths, we have several tropes like bury your gays, stuffed in the fridge, disposable woman, stuff like that. And the idea of the motivating factor in their death more than likely is going to be to help motivate typically what is going to be our white male protagonist. In this case, it would be Japanese male. And, Shigaraki to, undermine Overhaul. And it can be done effectively. Go ahead.
Yeah, it also kind of just shows them how villainous they are too. It's like, well, you took one of ours, we took one of yours, showing their lack of regard for life, which is a villain quality. So it kind of just sets up of like, oh, these people, they're not playing around. They're not the cookie cutter villains that just want to take your candy.
Yeah. And like I do have an issue with this in some series. Like for instance, in Buffy, we had Tara, who was Willow's girlfriend, die. It didn't help. She's a gay character, one of the first on-screen depictions of that in TV, and it was a little hurtful more because you actually kind of cared a little more about Tara. There's that. Then there's also, of course, some would argue that the death of Gwen Stacy is an example of being stuffed in the fridge. I would argue against that because of, number one, the fact that this is one of that trope wasn't around yet. That doesn't permanently exclude it, but it's also more of showing, the madness of Norman Osborn, as well as Gwen Stacy's decisions to do what she does, or Spider-Man's decisions to do what he does. But I do have an issue with what just happened recently within the last couple of years of Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, dying in Spider-Man, the comics, for the sake of having her die and be reborn as a mutant, for the sake of MCU synergy. Because you killed off a minority character of multiple minorities just for the sake of shock value and just for the sake of making more money. I have huge issues with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're getting a little off track. So anything else you want to add?
No, I like that we went into our individual rabbit trails, though, because we both had good points.
Excellent. All right, so next up on the docket, we have, like I mentioned earlier, there's a moment where Izuku and Mirio have the opportunity to save Eri and don't, because there's a bit of the talk that we don't have the proof yet, and Overhaul's threatening us right now, only to later realize that if they had acted then, they could have stopped this whole arc from happening. So, Pang, in your opinion, should they have intervened in that moment or not?
Well, it's the classic, we talked about this last episode. Do you disobey orders or the rules for the greater good that you think is the greater good? So are you going to not listen? In this case, they just knew to avoid him. You know what I mean? They had no idea the possible scenarios that could have unfolded. And so it's always better, I think, to proceed with caution, because if they did grab Eri, he was going to kill them all right there. So to say it could have been avoided, I disagree, because I think he would have taken them all on right then and there and just killed them all. And he would have taken Eri anyway. And then now no more My Hero Academia. Everyone dies.
Yeah, there's possible ways this could have gone. They could have gotten away with her. They could have been killed in that moment. It really depends on what the author would have wanted to do with that. So for me, I think I want to temper this with, hindsight 2020 being so obvious in the end. It's like, yeah, you can say whatever you want. Had I been the one in this moment, if I were just a regular civilian, I'm calling the cops. I'll let them know I saw this girl. She was obviously troubled. Looks like she's been abused. Here's the description of the man I saw, and hope for the best.
And that's kind of what they did. They reported a night eye immediately.
Yeah. But they're also in the place of policemen here, because they are serving in that role as heroes to an extent. So there's an argument to be made that they should have done something. I think ultimately I wouldn't have, but I really would have wanted to, just like them, because they did go through the proper channels and made sure, hey, we noticed this. We don't have the proof of it yet, but it's something we need to look at. But that's also that stirring me, like, how could I allow this evil to go on? I could have stopped it, but I'm also not God. I can't see everything. So you got to temper yourself at times.
Yeah, it's so hard. So I think about like in modern days, because I don't know where they learned this from. I'm sure they learned it from something, but kids be liars like in today's modern times. And I've seen it and I've heard it from my other friends. Like kids be like, I don't know you, thinking it's a joke. And like these parents are like in public is like, act right. And these kids, some of these kids are screaming bloody murder, acting like they're being kidnapped when the parents just won't let them buy a toy. So I'm sure it's like a little bit, I don't have kids, so I'm sure it's a little bit of discipline and stuff like that. So when he was like, this is my daughter, sorry, she's, she's like really afraid with strangers and whatnot. Like you can't be 100% so sure, but then it's that catch-22. Like if this happened in real life, like I as a former teacher, I was trained to look for what you were saying, those signs of abuse, and to report things. And being a mandated reporter, like I would feel disgusting if I let something slip by like that, which they did. You saw the remorse, and you just have to make the best decision you can in that moment. Like you can't play the what if game. And I'm sure like there's so many teachers, you hear about things like I had no idea it was happening right under my nose. And so I don't know. If you play the what if game, it's not a winning game.
Yeah. What ifs are a battle you can always lose or win depending on your state of mind at the time.
I've never won in what if game because whenever you play, it's usually because you regret your action. And so by playing, you already lost because you're not willing to move forward. You're looking back.
Okay. Now, we kind of covered this question a little earlier, but a huge part of Kirishima's arc is living up to the standards of his idol Crimson Riot. How does this play out in the story? And do we have some personal idols of our own we look up to?
I mean, like if we talk about like, I like a few authors and guest speakers, but when I think of like hero as like idolize, you know what I mean? Like that, I don't really have anyone I idolize. I have people I highly respect, and I have a couple of mentors in my life that if I grow up being half the woman they are, like I've lived a fantastic life. But I wouldn't, idolize is like a strong term for me. And then like I follow some celebrity like Christians that I'm like, wow, like if they are speaking at a conference nearby, I'm buying tickets to those conferences because I want to glean under them.
Yeah. And for me, I grew up idolizing the heck out of Steve Irwin. I loved the Crocodile Hunter.
You a big sad, huh?
I love watching. I love hearing him discuss these animals. Watching him wrestle with the crocodiles, but also like, hey, these are an important part of the environment, stuff like that. I learned a lot as a kid, and I learned of his death as I am on a plane for the first time. I've been on a plane as a young adult on the TV screen in front of me as the CNN is reporting it, and I spent the 2-hour flight to New York just distraught.
Yeah, that's hard. I think of when Kobe Bryant passed away, and it hasn't been that long ago. Has it been a year, 2 years now?
It's more than that, I think.
It's been more than that. I feel like it just happened. But like I watched some people that I know, like they had to grieve. And it's just one of those things like we talked about earlier. I didn't really keep up with sports. So I was sympathetic of the situation. I was very sad, like, because I believe his daughter was with them too. I'm like, young lives, young influencers who had everything going for them. That's so freaking sad. But I didn't have the empathy that these other people felt because, like you were saying, they idolized him. That was a hero. They wanted to be like him. So, I mean, if there's a couple, like one of my, the guest speaker, I really enjoy her. Her name is Lisa Harper, and she had COVID, I think like 3 years ago. And we thought she was gonna not make it. And so I was just like, Lisa. And so, I mean, you pray if someone asks you to pray, you pray, but how fervently you pray, really hits closer to home. You know what I mean? Like, so it was like a big prayer. I'm like, Lord, touch her, do this, do that. Versus if someone like I have no connection with whatsoever, like, I might be like, God, touch them. You know what they need. Versus if I call someone out by name praying for them, because like we were saying, it's all about that connection. So I'm sorry you got sad about Steve Irwin. I just talked about him the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because my friend's kid was handling a snake. They're like, well, it wasn't poisonous. Like, it's fine. And I was like, yeah, let them know about Steve Irwin, about things being fine when you get too cocky.
Yeah. As well, other idols, of course, my dad. My dad has always been a strong man to look up to. And Pang has actually met my father.
Yeah, he bought me dinner.
He's always showed me he's the one to help lead me to faith. He's always been a strong guiding hand in that regard as well. My former pastor of that church we went to, Mike Davis, that's a man I still call to this day. If there's something I'm wrestling with or a future decision I'm going to make, I go to him for his advice. He's never steered me wrong. But really, as a kid, outside of my dad, it was my maternal grandfather. He was one of the best people I ever knew until he passed when I was in high school. he would take me places. If I had an interest that he knew nothing about, he'd go with me. There's so many times that we'd go to the zoo, or we'd go to a nature preserve or something like that, or these different little locations that some of the stuff, like, yeah, he loved nature and all that, but other stuff, like, he couldn't have cared less about, but he knew I cared. So he went with me to have a good time. And like, if I could be like a tenth of the man that he is, I would call myself a success. And I think that's kind of the way that Kirishima kind of looks up to Crimson Riot in that same regard, because I don't think he appears after this part of the story, because I think he's dead or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it serves as that motivator. So like, who is that motivator? Who's that person that you look up to, and why do you look after them? Well, for Kirishima, it's because for this man, he represented the true hero. And for the men I looked up to, it's because I saw different aspects of them. But I want to be like that because I see what good they do to others.
I was looking what happened to Crimson Riot, but
yeah.
Yeah, and that's hard because I didn't really have that growing up. My my connections were anime. That's why I'm so passionate about it now. I always say anime has been my most loved, my known, like, ride or die, because of course, like, Jesus has been my, like, with me from the beginning of time. But I didn't know he was with me until, like, I was a later teen. But to me, anime has been my known comforter for the longest time. And so just kind of growing up.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong. But I mean, like, but I still knew, like, I didn't look up to anime characters, even though I loved them. I didn't idolize them. I had them as a hero. And I didn't have any, like, my husband's parents was the very first godly marriage I've ever saw. And so I think my mother-in-law was like the first, I guess, spiritual woman in my life. And so that didn't happen until I was like 16, 17. So I didn't grow up idolizing anyone, which, it has shaped me because I'm almost too independent and I struggle with vulnerability a lot. And so, like, the people, like the mentors I mentioned earlier, like, it took me a while, like 14 years of just having that relationship with. But it's fun, I think, to have an idol or a hero. Like, I can't wait to hopefully be that to my future kid one day.
I think you'll do quite fine at that.
We'll see if they don't hate me. It could happen. 50-50 shot, honestly.
You'll make it through. The part of raising a kid, just from outside looking in, is that it's going to be rough. It's going to be great.
We'll see.
Yeah.
That was not a pregnancy or baby announcement. Everyone, do not hope long for it.
Okay. Anyways, speaking of children.
Yes.
As far as Ares' introduction is concerned, many people have argued that it led to the creation of having this whole Deus Ex Machina. For those who don't know, Deus Ex Machina is Greek for God in the machine. It refers to what would happen in the old theater plays. When a hero couldn't possibly win, a god would descend down and pretty much resolve the conflict. And this has been an accusation thrown out against media for many years, that since she has this quirk that could reverse anything given enough time passing, there's really no stake in some of the story. So what do we think of her as a character? And is she just a plot device to reverse bad things that happens to our heroes? Because she does later on.
Yeah, I think she was used very well, especially near the end fight scene whenever she was holding on to Midoriya and she was reversing his injuries. Because, and we've talked about this before, you hate when, and I know I keep on talking about other anime, but you just hate when people go Goku and you just know he's going to, like, just beast it through somehow. Now there's going to be a Super Saiyan Blue, and now he's going to be like, it went from 1, 2, 3 blue super god, and it's like, all right, Goku's going to win. Doesn't really matter who's the enemy, god, no god, Goku's going to win, But it's not like that for Midoriya, because you see the human with him and you see him losing at times and you see the growth process. Like, Goku's like, I'm gonna go train in the forest and get strong. But like Midoriya, you actually, like, it's just weird. But like, so I almost said the wrong name. Midoriya was put in an impossible battle. He really was. And so he needed Eri to win so he could use his quirk at like 100%, because we know as it builds up that when he uses his quirk at 100%, his body gets destroyed. So now he can actually unleash this full power with Eri reversing the damages. And so it was built up, I think, pretty well, of how, Deku wasn't what you were saying, like just a going to go be a savior, because there's a time you're just wondering, like, is it going to happen? Is he going to lose and have to like come back later? And like you kind of are left wondering like what's going to happen.
Yeah, I would argue, at least in this arc, no, she's not a Deus Ex Machina, because we've established what she's capable of, and as we will see later on, the more she uses her quirk, the smaller her horn gets, which means she's less capable to do things. So it takes her time to grow in order to, get her quirk, to actually be usable. And as we'll discover later on too, a part of that is also she's an early sign that the more kids in this age keep, being born, the stronger quirks get as time passes on. So she's kind of foreshadowing that bit later on. Now, as far as her role later on in the story, without spoiling certain things, I think she's used just fine, because that drawback is still there. If she uses a quirk, if it's really difficult, her horn's going to go down and shrink, and it's going to take her that much longer to recharge.
And it shows her learning how to use her quirk, because she couldn't. And that was one of the sad, empathetic thing we got with the abuse, because she couldn't really learn how to use her quirk. She didn't know they would draw blood from her, and that's how the bullets were made, with her blood. And you see all these bandages getting more of our sympathy and empathy towards Ares. But so she's not just this person who dropped in is automatically God tier. Like you can see the vulnerability and the humanity within her as she learns more about her quirk and herself.
And I will say, as time goes on, there's in the final chapter just a small scene with her that does make me smile. Well, so you have that to look forward to.
I'm very excited.
All right, Pang, do you have anything else you'd like to discuss before we start wrapping things up?
I wish I could be like Fat Gum, because there's no, like, look at Choji, look at Fat Gum. There's no positive images of female getting fat. And that makes me sad.
Well, we do have Choji's daughter. Oh, gosh, what is her name? In Boruto.
Yeah, but like, Boruto was just such a letdown. I was like that. It was very sad.
I see your point.
Like,
and
normalize women getting fat
doesn't solve the issue.
Yeah, normalize women being fat and it being fun.
So okay, I'm not going to go that far.
I'm just kidding. Be healthy just be healthy. Whatever shape, size you are, you should be healthy.
Yes. All right. With that in mind, guys, we are going to be doing a bonus question today that is exclusively for our Patreon and Captivate supporters. And it's going to be a question: if we could have had another UA student join in the hero operations for this arc, who would it be and why? So be thinking about that, Pang, as I know you just got introduced to that question.
No, I did not read the outline. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm thinking right now, though.
All right. That's all I ask. So, guys, thank you very much for what you do. But before we get there, I forgot, Pang, what would you rate this arc out of 10?
Oh, I would say 9.5. And I say that because I would go and rewatch this arc like right now. So if I'm ready to go ahead and just rewatch it, like it's a good one.
Okay. Yeah. This is my favorite arc in all of My Hero Academia. This is an easy 10 out of 10. I love pretty much everything that happens here. There's a lot of good fun. It really gets into the deep philosophy of like what makes someone a hero? Like, why is our society based around this? How do we stop this criminal element? And then how do we actually protect the people we claim we're going to protect? I love this series so much. This arc is my favorite. 10 out of 10. All right, guys, thank you very much for everything that you do for us. Please, if you get a chance, leave a 5-star review in your podcast platform of choice. But once again, I skipped ahead before I should have gotten there. I don't even read my own outline, apparently. Pang, recommendations for the audience.
Well, I just got the notification that Taylor's gym badges from Pokemon Generation 1 just got delivered. So maybe it's for a trunk or treat I'm doing next month for church. It's a Pokemon trunk or treat. So I've been buying all the Pokemon things for it. So maybe go watch some Pokemon and give me some trunk or treat recommendations. Okay, thanks.
All right. Fair enough. I just read not too long ago the first issue of Aliens versus Avengers, which was really good. It established a good rule for why in this alternate universe the aliens took control of the Earth, leaving only a few survivors left. It's a really fun story, very dark story, so if you're not into that, don't go that way. So now that we're actually at this section, I will say Thank you guys for everything that you do. Please, if you get a chance, leave a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice. As well, you can send episode topics our way through systematicgeekology@gmail.com. We do love taking your recommendations and into mind when we're coming up with episode ideas. As well, since you guys got us to over 100 subscribers on YouTube, you can send us a list of questions of anything in particular, anything that interests you, so we can get as many hosts as possible to do a Q&A session and just have fun with that. I'd like to shout out some supporters as well. Thank you, Russell Gentry, Justin Vaughn, Annette Knoll, and Jeannie Mattingly. You guys are the best. You help keep the lights on. We really appreciate everything you do. But remember, we are all the chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
Hello, friends. If you enjoy Systematic Ecology, a great way to support us and to keep us moving forward into the future is to be a patron on our Patreon network. If you're a Patreon, then you get live access to our YouTube exclusives like Comic Book Ketchup and Manga Mustard, Drinks with Tejas, and also some extra content there with our companion series to go along with our annual theme. If you're a patron, you get exclusive merch like t-shirts and handbags and mugs. There's also a bonus extra question that has extra content. In each episode, we go deeper into our faith and the questions that we're wrestling with, but we also do this extra question to jump in and share about, and patrons get to hear how we answer that question. There's discounts on our store. You get access to any future online D&D campaigns. You can easily access all of our Patreon content through our Spotify page where it says exclusive content for subscribers. That could be you folks. And all that being said, you get the satisfaction that you help us keep the lights on and keep us moving forward with our software, our marketing, our equipment, staying current in the podcast game. We love Systematic Ecology. We hope you do too. Support us moving forward. Thank you for all that you are. We know there's a lot of great choices and content out there, and you choose to listen to Systematic Ecology. Thanks, folks. We love you. Peace.
Hi, my name is TJ, and I'm here to tell you about the Anazal Ministry Podcast Network. We have a bunch of shows on AMP. You can follow the entire network in a single feed on Spotify at Anazal Ministry Podcasts or on the network page on Apple Podcasts. Some of the ones we're running right now are The Homily, which is Pastor Will's homily messages from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in Chapel Hill. We have the Whole Church Podcast, which one of my favorites. It's where myself and Joshua we interview leaders from different denominations and backgrounds to work for a full church unity, Big C. We have My Seminary Life by Brandon Knight, former host on Systematic Ecology. He discusses his experience at seminary and discusses seminary topics so anyone can access the knowledge, which is kind of cool. It's like the book, Everything You Learn in Business School and then Everything You Don't Learn at Business School. That's great. We have Let Nothing Move You by Christian Ashley. He goes through the Bible kind of like it's a Bible study to explain the biblical narrative through his perspective and what he's learned. Dummy for Theology, which is Joshua's show, he discusses various theological topics in an attempt to show every side of big discussions. That leaves you with more questions than answers, which everyone loves a lot. It's kind of a continuation of a series that we did on Whole Church, but it's really good. It's really fun. We have the Bible After Hours, where the foul-mouthed preacher goes through the Bible from a progressive view to challenge the status quo of the modern church. I love that one. If you're from a more conservative background, that one I find will probably be the most helpful for you. Definitely check that out. And we have the Clydes. Taylor and Elizabeth Clyde go through weekly discussions in a devotional, conversational method to help us get closer to one another and God. That's just a little review of what we do in AMP and all of our other shows. So check that out, get subscribed, and just start getting all that free content, you know?